Welcome back to Yossr English. Today we are going to talk about something that most people have never really stopped to think about carefully. Two words that seem similar, two experiences that from the outside can look exactly the same. Someone sitting by themselves in a quiet room, someone walking alone in a park, someone eating at a table for one. From the outside, it all looks the same. But on the inside, these two experiences could not be more different. We are talking about being alone and being lonely, and understanding the difference between these two things might be one of the most important things you ever do for your mental and emotional health. Because here's what I've noticed. A lot of people are terrified of being alone, not because being alone is actually painful for them, but because they have never learned to separate it from loneliness. They have never given themselves the chance to discover what being alone actually feels like when it is chosen, when it is peaceful, when it is theirs. And so they fill every quiet moment, every empty evening, every silent space with noise, with people, with distraction, anything to avoid sitting with themselves. And on the other side, there are people who are surrounded, who are never technically alone, who have a full house, a busy social life, a phone that never stops buzzing, and they feel deeply, profoundly lonely because being surrounded is not the same as being connected, and that distinction changes everything. So today on Yossr English Podcast, we are going to explore this honestly. What does it actually mean to be alone? What does loneliness really feel like, and where does it come from? And most importantly, how do you build a relationship with yourself that makes solitude something you genuinely look forward to, rather than something you run from? Stay with me, and while you listen, let the English flow naturally into your mind. This is your listening practice today. Real ideas, real language, real conversation. What being alone actually is. Solitude, real solitude, is one of the most underrated experiences available to a human being. And I think it is underrated because we live in a world that has decided that busyness is productivity, and that silence is emptiness, and that being by yourself means something is wrong with you or your life. But that is simply not true. Being alone, when it is chosen, when it comes from a place of comfort rather than avoidance, is where some of the most important things happen. It is where you hear your own thoughts clearly, maybe for the first time all day. It is where you reconnect with what you actually want, separate from what everyone around you wants or expects. It is where creativity lives, where clarity comes, where rest actually reaches the deeper parts of you that small talk and noise never touch. Think about the moments in your life when you had your best ideas, when you finally understood something that had been confusing you, when you made a decision that felt truly right. I would guess that many of those moments happened in quiet, in solitude, not in a crowd. Because the crowd is wonderful for many things, for laughter and warmth and celebration and belonging. But the crowd cannot give you the one thing that only silence can: access to yourself. And that is what being alone offers. Not isolation, not sadness, not something to be endured, but a genuine, valuable, sometimes even joyful access to your own inner world. What loneliness actually is. Loneliness is different, and it is important to understand it clearly because loneliness is often misunderstood. People think it is simply about being without people, but it is not. Loneliness is about being without connection, and connection is not the same as presence. You can be in a room full of people and feel completely alone. You can be at a party, surrounded by laughter and music and movement, and feel a kind of emptiness that is hard to explain. You can be in a long relationship and feel like no one truly knows you. That feeling, that specific ache, that is loneliness, and it has nothing to do with how many people are physically near you. Loneliness is the feeling of not being seen, not being understood, not mattering to anyone in a real and genuine way. It is the distance between who you truly are and what you feel safe showing to the world. And sometimes that distance is created by other people, by environments that do not welcome honesty, by relationships that are built on performance rather than truth. But sometimes, and this is the harder truth, that distance is created by ourselves, by the parts of us that we have decided are too much or not enough to show anyone, by the walls we built for good reasons once and then forgot to take down. Why some people cannot be alone. Let me say something gently here. If you genuinely cannot be alone, if every moment of quiet feels unbearable, if you reach for your phone the second silence arrives, if you would rather be in bad company than no company at all, that is worth paying attention to. Not with judgment, with curiosity. Because the inability to be alone is usually not about needing people. It is about what happens when the noise stops. It is about the thoughts that arrive in the quiet, the feelings that have been waiting, the questions that do not have answers yet, and the silence makes them very loud. So the busyness, the constant company, the endless scrolling, it is not really about connection. It is about avoidance. A very human, very understandable avoidance, but avoidance nonetheless. And the painful irony is this: the more you avoid the quiet, the less you know yourself. And the less you know yourself, the harder it becomes to build real connection with others. Because real connection requires that you show up as yourself. And you cannot show up as yourself if you have been running from yourself. This is why learning to be alone is not just a nice habit. It is foundational. It is how you build the kind of inner life that makes real relationships possible. Why some people feel lonely even with everyone around them. This is perhaps the saddest form of loneliness, and it is far more common than people admit. It happens when you have spent so long being who others need you to be that you have lost track of who you actually are. When every relationship in your life is built on a version of you that is slightly adjusted, slightly performed, slightly less than the full truth. And people love that version. They appreciate it. They rely on it. But deep down, you know they do not know you. Not really. And that knowing creates a loneliness that no amount of company can fix. Because the problem is not the quantity of people. The problem is the depth of the connection. And depth requires honesty. And honesty requires courage. And courage requires first knowing yourself well enough to have something honest to show. This is the circle. And it begins and ends with your relationship with yourself. How to build a relationship with your own company. Now, I want to be practical for a moment, because I think this conversation is only useful if it leads somewhere real. If solitude feels uncomfortable to you right now, that is completely okay. It is a skill. Like any other skill, it is built slowly, through practice, through small exposures that grow over time. Start small. Give yourself 10 minutes of genuine quiet. No phone, no music, no background noise. Just you and whatever comes up. And notice what happens. Notice what thoughts arrive. Notice what feelings surface. Not to analyze them or fix them immediately, just to meet them, to acknowledge that they exist. And then gradually extend that time. A morning walk alone, a meal without distraction, an evening that belongs entirely to you. And pay attention to how it feels, not how you expect it to feel, how it actually feels. Because many people discover something surprising when they do this. They discover that their own company is actually quite good, that the quiet is not empty, that they have thoughts worth listening to, ideas worth following, a self worth knowing. And once you discover that, something shifts. You stop filling every quiet moment out of fear. You start choosing solitude sometimes because it genuinely feeds you. And that shift changes everything, including the relationships you seek and the ones you are willing to accept. The connection between this and real relationships. Here is something I believe deeply. The people who are most comfortable alone are often the most genuinely connected when they are with others, not because they need people less, but because they choose people more freely. They are not with someone to escape the quiet. They are with someone because they genuinely want to be. And that difference is felt. It creates a different quality of presence, a different quality of attention. When you are comfortable alone, you stop tolerating relationships that are not truly nourishing. You stop staying in situations just to avoid the silence. You raise the standard naturally, not out of pride, out of self-knowledge. You know what it feels like to be at peace, and you know the difference between that and the performance of connection. And the people who belong in your life will appreciate that about you. They will feel the difference between someone who needs them and someone who chooses them. And being chosen freely, without desperation, without dependency, is one of the most beautiful things one person can offer another. So let us come back to where we started. Two people sitting alone in a quiet room. One of them is lonely, aching for connection, feeling unseen, counting the minutes until the silence ends. The other is at peace, present with themselves, resting in the quiet, not waiting for anything to begin. Same room, same silence, completely different inner worlds. The difference is not the absence of people. The difference is the presence of self, of knowing yourself, of being comfortable in your own company, of having a relationship with your inner world that does not require constant noise to feel okay. And that is something you can build, slowly, honestly, one quiet moment at a time. I hope today something in this conversation stayed with you, and I hope it made you think, not just about relationships and solitude, but about the English words and ideas you have been absorbing this whole time. Because that is what Yossr English is, a place where the language and the lesson arrive together, where improving your English feels less like studying and more like living. If this episode meant something to you, share it with someone who might need it. Leave a comment and tell me honestly, are you someone who enjoys being alone, or does solitude still feel uncomfortable? There is no wrong answer. I am genuinely curious. Subscribe to Yossr English if you haven't already. A new episode every week. Real English, real conversations, the kind that stay with you. This is Yossr English. See you in the next one.